Looking kinda cute in this video. Trying to get comfy. Can't forget the blanket 'cause it's freezing. Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. As always, I'm excited you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me. We are done with the silver under doublet and we are now moving on to the velvet over doublet. It's there. We're gonna get there. We're starting somewhere else though. So same with the silver doublet. I started the process before I really started filming because anxiety is rude and I forget to film when I'm anxious. So when I cut out the silver doublet, I also cut out the velvet doublet. Once the silver doublet was done, I made my husband try it on, and then we fit the velvet doublet over top. Again, sorry, I don't have footage. So once everything was fit, I took apart one of the side seams just so that way I could line everything up nice and flat-like with the lining to make sure that all of the adjustments were made on both the fashion fabric as well as the lining fabric. You know, same thing we did with the silver doublet. When that was all done, I sewed that side seam back up because we are not bag lining. It's just a different process this time. Once all of the seams were sewed up, so I had an outer shell, it was time to mark out where the decorations were. So a quick reference to my reference photo. I started putting all the pins in to mark out where I wanted all of those like fancy trim chevron things to go, because it's more movable than chalk. This took a long time, guys. I'm speeding this up and cutting out the footage, but this took a really long time. Not as long as sewing on the trim though. Sewing on the trim. When I liked where all of the pins were placed, I couldn't wait to like see what I was envisioning in my head. So I went ahead and pinned some trim on where I thought it should go, just to make sure I liked it before I started making all the chalk lines. It was at this point when I realized this is a lot of trim and this is a lot of work, but it's gonna look so good. When that was done and I had the visual, I went ahead and used my ruler to help make sure that the chalk lines that I drew on were really straight. I did basically the same process to mark out everything on the back, and this is what the chalk lines look like. So this was just a guide that I used for when I started sewing on all of the trim. I started by sewing on the gold braid and then I couched on the gold cord. When that was done, it was time to do the same process to the skirting. Yeah. So I used the same ruler to mark about halfway through the skirting. And then I folded it in half and like rubbed it out to make sure that the chalk lines transferred so I wouldn't have to like redraw things a million times. I also wanted symmetry. I wanted things to be perfectly symmetrical. Because why not? I could. It transferred really nice and easy. So I marked out the chalk lines for every 4 inches, just like I had on the velvet pants, which you will see next week. But like I said, I was running out of trim, so I didn't know if I wanted to do it every 4 inches or every 8 inches. So I did it every 8 inches because I was worried about running out of trim. After adding the trim onto the skirting, I pinned it to the doublet and basted that in place just to make sure I got the full picture. Yeah, it was too sparse and I was worried about it. So I asked my husband. He said it was too sparse. So I took it apart and I added more trim. Onto the epaulets, wing thingies, which turned out okay. Same process, marked everything out, put the trim on. Then I flatlined them and applied the bias tape on the outer edges of the epaulets. Once that was done, I pinned the center of the epaulette, put it just off center on the lining, and pinned it into place. I did this for both epaulets. We're not going for any asymmetry here. Then I sewed them down. Then it's time to add in the lining. I wanted to make sure the lining didn't fall out of the bottom because it's a different method of construction. So I basted the skirting doublet seam together just to make sure nothing shifted and looked wonky. Okay, once that was done, I basted all of the edges of the doublet together. Remember guys, always water your iron. I did an ironing test on a scrap because one, I wanted to see how hot I could make the iron, and two, I wanted to make sure I didn't ruin the fabric. So I wasn't too happy with how it was pressing, but I pressed the rest of it anyway. It seemed to work out. I wasn't too happy with the result of the ironing. I still went around and just pinned all of the bias tape in place to make sure it was exactly where I wanted it to be. Once all of the pins were in, I took it over to my sewing machine. I make it sound like I go so far to get to my sewing machine. I don't. Weird. Okay. Anyway, I went to my sewing machine and I did a stitch in the ditch because I am trying to hide as much sewing seam lines as possible. Once all of the edges were secure and sewed down, I did the same process for the arm's eyes. I did a weird, funky technique on the epaulets that I usually do when I do a button placket. Again, you know what, guys? I'm just gonna make a detailed video on how I make menswear. Once I got all the bias tape on, it was time to cut the vents. I am cutting slits in the middle of this doublet. I might have procrastinated this a couple of days while I processed my panic attack, and then we were good. I had the confidence. We did the thing. We started out by marking out where those vents would go. I had already lined it up, so I knew that it would go on the bottom of the V for that, as well as the edge of where the trim was, because reference photo. To make sure that the lining didn't slide or bunch or decide to have a mind of its own and do this, I pinned it. Once all the pinning was done, I ran it under my machine, basting the two layers together, basically making a giant buttonhole, a gigantic buttonhole that you can fit your arms through. Still might have been processing my panic attack. Then it was a moment of truth. It was time to cut this thing open. Seam ripper! It was really hard to go through all the trim with the seam ripper, so I quickly switched over to a pair of scissors, which was somehow less scary. Don't ask me why. While I was cutting this open, I was very careful not to go outside of the parallel basting lines I had just made, because that would have been disastrous. Not really, we're putting bias tape over it. It would have been fixable, just not what I would have wanted to do. So, like I just said, putting bias tape over the whole thing, because that's a thing. When all of the bias tape was sewn onto the front, I needed to hand sew the rest of it down because I didn't trust myself to run that under my machine. So I did itty bitty whip stitches along the back, and then I put the tops and bottoms of the vents into these cute little points. I don't have any footage of it because I hand sew in bed and I'm not taking you guys to my bedroom. I don't like you guys that much. So after all the hand sewing on the vents was done, I went ahead and hand sewed that epaulet thing together too. I will explain it better in another video because there's absolutely nothing to help you guys understand that step here. So once all of that was done, the only thing left to do was to add the buttons. The buttons that I used were left over from my fur coat project. So excited I had some left over to be able to transfer onto this project just to make it more matchy and cute because we are that cute matchy couple. I am so happy of how this turned out. This is the most complicated menswear that I have done to date. It's the most complicated garment I have done to date. Like let's just be there. Most complicated garment I have done to date. It turned out so good and I'm just so excited. So excited. Anyway, stay tuned for making the pants. If you missed the previous videos on making the silver doublet, I will put them here. I think that's the corner you need. If it's not, I'll put them down in the description for you guys. Have a great day, and thank you for tuning in. Bye, guys. I wish I would have found my tripod so you guys could have been up higher and I could like sit up and look like self-important and have better posture and look like I'm professional or something. Ooh, I just burped and tasted dinner. What is adjective transition word I'm looking for? I don't know.